I just did 10 weeks of therapy. And I know 10 weeks of therapy, 10 weeks is not a lot in the grand scheme of like people doing therapy their whole life. But even after 10 weeks, 10 out of 10, I would recommend. And I'm going to tell you what I learned and why I would recommend it. Especially, so men, of course, need to get therapy too. They need, to unpack some things. But me, my channel, I'm always here for the girls. Although recently, the percentage of men have increased on my channel. Welcome, you are welcome. Hi, hope you're enjoying yourself. But really and truly, I'm always for the girls. And I feel like girls, we've kind of been made to feel like emotions are the weaker of the traits. Like they're irrational, they're this compared to logic. And if you're like me and you have a lot of emotions, I think we need to know that emotions are valid, emotions are real, emotions are important, and they're just as important as other things like logic, because those two are always compared. That being said, here's what I learned in therapy. Let's go. Firstly, guys, I'm sorry if you can hear banging. My neighbours are doing some DIY. Hopefully you can't hear it. Cool. So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're good, hope you're well. If you haven't already, please subscribe. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, you will know that I've talked a lot about having feelings of anxiety a lot, as far back as I can remember, but only really starting to recognize them and for it to kind of worsen when I entered the working world. So after uni, started working, it just went whoosh. So a bit of backstory how I came to do therapy. I did talking therapy. I did 10 weeks of talking therapy, counseling, I don't know what you call it. So yes, as I said, anxiety has been something that I've felt. It's been something that I've dealt with, do deal with. And it really started to get the better of me at the beginning of lockdown. I was working from home. Work was not slowing down as everybody else around me was describing. It was actually intensifying. It was a lot. And I just wasn't coping very well. I think a lot of people were left alone with their thoughts, no distractions of being out of the house and stuff. And so I feel like it really took its toll. Luckily, my workplace, they do private health insurance. And so I was fortunate enough to have mental health, stuff included in that. Really thankful, because I know therapy can be expensive, although there are free ways to get it. And so before I went about doing it through private health insurance through work, I actually went to the doctor, because I was going to the doctor quite often saying that, I've got sharp pains in my chest and tight chest and shortness of breath. And they kept saying like, it might be this, let's do an x-ray. And then I finally asked my doctor, could it be anxiety? And she said, yeah, it could be. Then I said, okay, so what can we do about it? She said, well, there's pills, there's medication you can take. And I said, is there another option like therapy? And she said, yeah, there's therapy. I was thinking, okay, yeah, that would have been nice as the first option. Anyway, so they put me on a wait list to do NHS Time to Talk. Now, NHS Time to Talk was really good, really helpful. However, it was CBT therapy. And although CBT therapy is helpful in helping you manage, like giving you practical tips to manage the anxiety, what frustrated me is that I still didn't know why I was feeling the way I'm feeling. I still didn't get to the root of it, and that is what I wanted to do. So CBT was all well and good, but the kind of person I am, like I said, I needed to get to the root of it. I didn't like doing stuff and not knowing why I'm doing it. So then I went through the private health insurance, and the process was pretty smooth. I mean, if you're fortunate enough to be able to afford private or through work, I would highly recommend. The process was very smooth. The insurance provider, gave me a short list of counsellors. I went through them all and I was like, not really feeling them. I wanted someone close by, even though it wasn't going to be face-to-face because we're in the pandemic. I wanted someone close by in case it did end up being face-to-face. So I went on the directory thing and I searched myself, and I also felt that I wanted a woman, and I wanted a black woman, or like a woman from like an ethnic minority background, just because I felt like some of the things that I might divulge, they might understand it more. Do you get it? Like there might be some like closeness in culture that would help them to understand. Like if I say X about my childhood, they would get it. That was my thinking, right? So anyways, found a woman, She was a mixed race woman. Got them approved through the health insurance, called her up. She spoke to me for about 10 minutes and then she said, right, thanks for like explaining all of this to me. I'm going to refer you to Dr. So-and-so. I said, oh, okay. I wasn't too happy because I went to her directly because I wanted her, and she referred me to a Caucasian man. And I was like, whoa, can't relate because he's a man, can't relate culture-wise, upbringing-wise. But I said, you know what, it's fine. She even said, just have a session with him. If you're not feeling it, come back to me, blah, 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 blah. I said, okay, cool. She's the professional. She obviously knows why she referred me to this man. And after my first session, I said, wow, I love this man. He was amazing. I don't know how she knew that this is what I needed, but he was exactly what I needed. And I said, wow, I can't believe I was so sure that I needed a woman or a black woman. But actually, I mean, I get why people do want that, and it probably would have brought with it some like good things. But this guy, the gentleness that he came with and just his whole approach was like exactly what I needed. If you know me well and then you met him, you would understand why he was the perfect therapist for me. So that's a bit of background into how I came about finding a therapist. Also, I forgot to mention that before this, I did do an assessment with the health insurance provider and they suggested talking therapy because I'd already explained to them I'd been through CBT, this was what I'm feeling, I did a test, they told me I had this and this and this, whatever, and this is how I came about. So that's just a bit of background. Now, what did I learn in 10 weeks? A lot. Let's get into it. So firstly, I learned that everything mostly stems from my childhood and my upbringing. So when you're watching the movies and they're lying on the sofa and they're like, tell me about your childhood. And I was always like, okay, cool. But because my childhood was fine, no complaints whatsoever. But yeah, basically everything comes from childhood. Like he would ask me constantly, is this, did this come from somewhere like in your childhood, in your upbringing? I'd be thinking like, what? No, my childhood was fine. The two don't link at all. It was great. Mum's great. Like everything's great. And then the more he would make me dig, I'd realize, this thing that I didn't even remember or this thing that I didn't even think was that deep is what's causing me to be the way I am now. So yeah, don't underestimate the effect that your upbringing has on you, because it's like your first experience of everything, isn't it? Your first experience of love, of discipline, of fear, of loss, of everything. So that was the first thing I learned. And I was like, oh, so the movies are not like, it's not just a cliche when they say, tell me about your childhood. Like this is a real thing. The second and biggest actually revelation I had, because I went in there, obviously to deal with anxiety. I dealt with a lot more, which was very interesting, but my main thing was the anxiety, and I got the answer I wanted, which was what is the root cause of this? And I came to the revelation that most of my fears and my anxieties come from my fear of how I'm perceived by other people. This blew my mind a little bit and was also quite hard for me to come to terms with, because when you think of like a people pleaser or whatever, I don't think of me. Like I'm not like, yes. Oh, please, yes, I hope you like this. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. That's not me. And that's in my head what I thought of someone who cares too much what people think. That's how they are. But actually, no, there's levels to this. And yeah, it came from a fear of man, essentially, and a fear of how I'm being perceived. So although there were triggers to my anxiety, work being one of the biggest ones, there were triggers, but the root of it was how I'm perceived. So for example, my fear of not being seen as excellent, amazing, an expert in something is what causes me to overwork. So every single task I'm given at work, it's good obviously to do stuff with a spirit of excellence, and I do everything as though unto Christ, because that's what I do. But there's that, and then there's every single task feeling pressure and fear that you have to do it at 150% when that is not feasible. I can't do 10 tasks at 150% and not be flipping burnt out. Do you get it? So sometimes this was enough, but because of fear of not being seen as Adella's amazing, or not being open to having feedback, because feedback means I didn't get it right the first time. Do you get it? those sorts of fears drove a lot of my anxiety. Another fear of perception was fear of being seen as lazy, which I didn't know came from my childhood. I'm the last born out of two sisters. There's two of us. You know, my sister Anna. I'm the youngest. So she assumed a lot of responsibility in our childhood, and sometimes I was perceived or told that I was lazy. Maybe I was, but also maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was just a product of being a last born and having everything else done and other people taking responsibility. So that maybe wasn't necessarily fair, but I've kind of like held on to that. And now when I'm not productive, I am anxious. And even if I've decided I'm going to rest today, I feel anxious. And when someone walks in the room, I get busy. I look busy. So those sorts of things, again, is not me. It's coming from my fear of how I'm being perceived by other people. And then fear of being perceived in a negative light, or actually what I realized, fear of being perceived in a light that I don't think is accurate. So if I think I'm one way, I have a fear that people will see me in a way that I deem incorrect. So incorrect perception of me. Yeah. That fear causes me to avoid confrontation. That was a big one, which leads me nicely into the second and very big realization. Well, this wasn't actually a realization, but we unpacked it, was that I do not like confrontation. But let's discuss that word confrontation, because what I learned is that my definition of confrontation was way off. And I know it, but I'd never actually explored my definition, right? So when I use the word confrontation, I'm talking, actually, let me read the actual definition of confrontation, because we all know it, right? Confrontation, a hostile or argumentative situation or meeting between opposing parties. Yeah, hostile, argumentative. But my definition was more like anything and everything, any conversation that is not light, pleasant, fluffy almost, anything that's not that, my brain process as confrontation. So in my head, a confrontational situation could just be, I disagree with you and I'm expressing why I disagree with you, or I'm going to correct you in love, or I'm going to tell you that you've hurt me, you've hurt my feelings. All of those things in my head were confrontation, even though they didn't have to be argumentative, they didn't have to be hostile. And that was a problem, because it causes me to not be myself. So a big realization was that so many people that know me don't actually know me, because I've been presenting this agreeable, neutral side of myself, when actually I'm just not speaking up when I need to speak up, which leads back to fear of people, fear of how I'm perceived. And it also makes me feel like I've set a precedent now. Like I'm 27. Those of you who have known me for however long, you've known me to be this type of person. And so what my therapist is saying, yeah, but you know, you can tell someone if they've upset you, you can tell them if you disagree, da. In my head, I'm like, oh, but I can't just switch up on people. So if I spent so long being this neutral friend that people come to because they know that I'm going to affirm them, they know that I'm not going to judge them, and then all of a sudden I'm like throwing correction here, I'm throwing this here, and in my head it's always an extreme. It's never just like, oh, hey babe, I just don't think, you should have done this. It's confrontation, which I realize I've been using the incorrect definition of it. Also, this avoidance of confrontation that I've had, it kind of has brought out in me like this manipulative trait, and not in like a malicious way, but what I unpacked in therapy was that I can manipulate a situation and people to avoid confrontation for my sake, but it's kind of being fake. So an example of this would be, a good example was how back in the day when I used to work in Zara, a shop. When I used to work in retail, I had a manager who was quite difficult. Like her mood was very hot and cold, right? And she was actually getting married, and I noticed that whenever you brought up her wedding, her mood would switch and she would be so nice. And so whenever I felt like anxious because she's like in a bad mood, I would just say, hey, have you found a dress? Hey, how's the venue search going? And it would change completely. So it was manipulative because I didn't care. I didn't actually want to ask her that, but I knew that that situation would work out in my favor, which it was peace, tranquility, if I pandered to something that I know that brought out the best in her. Does that make sense? So I also learned that came from my childhood. It came from a prominent figure that was in my life for a good 8 years, from when I was quite young. And that's what they were like. They were quite hot and cold, made for quite an anxious environment for me. And so I would use that manipulation tactic to be like, hey, do you want this thing that I know you like? Do you want a cup of tea or whatever? And I know that would bring out the best response. And so that's something that I do often. I don't want to say pander. Is pander the right word? I don't know these words. My English is... I know what makes people tick in the right way, and I would use that to my advantage. So it's almost like I'm being fake to get the best version of you for the sake of my peace, which is mad. And then the final thing that this avoidance of confrontation brought out or led to was anger, which is the final and the most surprising revelation. The most surprising thing I learned in therapy was anger. I have a lot of anger. Let's talk about that emotion, because my therapist had to drag this confession out of me. I didn't know I was I would have never described myself as angry. I'm not saying I'm an angry person, but I would have never described that emotion as being prominent in me. I've never lost my temper in front of anyone. I'm not confrontational, so how can I be angry, right? But what happened is I was using every other word under the sun except anger. So he would ask me, how does that make you feel? And I'd say, oh, I felt quite irritated, or it kind of annoyed me, or it made me a bit like agitated, or like a bit resentful. And he's like, okay, and what are all those words? Like, what do they fall under? And then one day I was like, anger? He was like, yeah, anger. So I was so like subconsciously really trying to avoid saying that I was angry, when actually all of these things I was describing were anger. And that was a revelation. So I learned that anger, just like every other emotion, emotions need to be felt. Do you know what I mean? You're not supposed to just like ignore them or suppress them, because your body will it will come out somehow. Do you know what I mean? Like if you bottle something up, it will come out somehow. So if you try to avoid expressing the emotion, avoid feeling the emotion, that is a problem. So emotions are there to be felt. You then obviously need to use common sense and reason and rationale to know how best to express that emotion. So I can be angry and I can accept that I'm angry, but how I choose to express it, that's my choice. And that's something I'm still working on, because I'm still working on that. So what now? It sounds like I had a lot of negative revelations, but no, they weren't negative at all, because now I understand myself better. I am more in control of my emotions, because before I was going around like not knowing what I'm feeling, not knowing what's going on, not knowing why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. But now I understand it, and what that's allowed me to do now is actually implement those coping mechanisms, those breathing techniques, all those kind of things. They don't feel as useless, as pointless, because I didn't know this about myself, but I don't like pointless things. I don't like things that I don't know if they're working. But now that I've gotten to the root of it, those practices make a lot more sense. So the order for me should have been getting to the root and then figuring out exercises to help that. I'm also much more quickly aware of when I'm in a situation that is bringing up one of these revelations that I've had. I'm much more quickly aware of it. So for example, I'm much more aware, much quicker in the moment if I'm having a conversation and I'm avoiding confrontation, or I'm avoiding speaking what I actually want to say and my actual truth. I'm much more aware of it. It doesn't mean I've mastered it, doesn't mean I'm confronting left, right and center, but it just means I'm aware of it, and I can be like, take steps to be like, actually, no, you don't agree. So don't say you agree. Actually tell that person what you actually think about that situation, and if they don't like it, they don't like it, or it's actually not going to be as bad as you think it's going to be, like, because this is what people do, you know, that have normal levels of confrontation. And finally, I'm much more accepting of myself. This is, I want to like hone in on this. This is the most important thing for sure, 100%. And if you don't take anything away from this video, I'm much more accepting of myself. And this is a big thing for me because I do beat myself up a lot. And I think it's so easy when you have a trait, a quirk, a personality, whatever, that has some negative elements of it, as most personalities do, right? There's the good and there's the bad. When there's the negative and when it affects you in a negative way, that can really it really made me believe that the trait is just bad all in all. So me, for example, being a peacemaker, because that caused me to fear confrontation, because that caused me to care about people and care what they think, and because that is the root of a lot of my anxieties, I almost dislike that thing about myself. When actually, yes, there's obviously going to be some negative sides to any personality, but there's also positives. Also, you know, people feel comfortable around me. I can see both sides of the coin. I can be neutral. I can be a diffuser in some situations. I can show love and compassion and empathy. So these are actually good things, and I shouldn't forget that just because this negative side of it causes these negative emotions to come up in me and causes me to feel negative stuff. I am, if you know about Enneagram, I'm a type 9. And so it's so easy to like look for all the things. My sister sends me Enneagram stuff all the time, yeah. And it's so easy to just focus on the things that it tells you, you know, need correcting or you need to work on, and completely ignore all the positive stuff that there is about you being you. And so that is the biggest thing. It's just accepting that I am the way I am. And rather than being like, oh, okay, I don't like confrontation, right, I need to change my whole personality. No, accept this, but also accept the good stuff that come, and accept that this is the way I am. How do I make the most of me and my personality so that I can be, not to sound cliche, but be the best version of myself without having to change my whole personality or my whole being. Yeah, so that's all I learned. That's not all, that's everything that I learned. I think there's a lot more, but I mean, come on, let me not divulge too much. So basically, yes, if you are thinking about therapy, I would highly recommend. Another quick thing I want to point out is that the whole childhood thing, it can really make you defensive, especially if you feel like my mum's been great, my family's been great, everything's been great. You don't almost want to like poo on their name. But you know, I think you just have to accept that people are human and parents are gonna either make mistakes or maybe they didn't even make a mistake, but just circumstantially this thing caused you to be the way that you are. And so you have to be open to that. But yeah, let me know, guys, in the comments below if you've had therapy and if there's any sort of big revelations that you learned about yourself. I'd love to hear about them because I think it is very, very eye-opening. And there's something about a stranger reading you that for some reason I accept that more than my husband telling me something about myself, interestingly. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you want to see me in the depth of my anxiety for your entertainment, no, I'm joking. I have a video about when I had a day in the life and I was not having a good day. I tried to keep it real. You can watch that. And yeah, I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.